confusion. So I'm just going to say a disclaimer first. So know that everything I say isn't truth. So it's not that what I say is the gospel and I'm asking you to believe what I say. In no way is that the way this talk is. I know that's what you're used to, and when I say that what I say isn't truth, you think what I'm saying to you is that what I'm saying is a lie or untrue, and that's not what I'm saying either. The way that I see things is that you don't have a fixed truth. It's an objective reality, so say this is plastic. I think there was something in plastic sheeting. And we have words that make up sentences to make up meaning. So in English we would say this is a plastic sheeting. This is a plastic sheet. In French, I'm sure they would say that completely different. So in English we would say this is a plastic sheet. A plastic sheet or a plastic cover. And in French maybe they say a cover which is plastic. Who knows how they say it. So and French is very close to English. Apparently 60% of the words are the same. So in other languages they would say that differently. And the way that our mind works and the neural pathways in our brain work is that we have associated meanings with things which we've been taught from our parents. So to me, the associated meaning of this is a biro pen. To a French person, it's a, whatever they call it in French. To a Spanish person, whatever they call it in Spanish. To a Indian person, whatever they call it in Tamil or Hindi or one of the other many languages, I'm not sure of that many. To Egyptian people, it would be in some form of Arabic. I'm not sure what Egyptian Arabic is. So this pen has lots of different sounds. Humans put lots of different sounds for calling this a pen. And we use sounds and we put them in sentences and we can form meaning. So we all have a meaning to those words and we can communicate. So I could say, I picked up this pen. So we know the word pick means to take and to move. So I picked up this pen. And our brain is so quick that it puts meanings to all those words. It puts it in a sentence and it creates an understanding of what the other person is trying to express. If you have travelled around a lot and speak with people of different languages and speak different languages, I'm currently learning French, so it's a big subject for me. If you do that, then you understand that in every country, people say things so differently, and the meanings, I pick up a pen, that could be really confusing if I was teaching that sentence, I pick up a pen, because there could be different meanings for pick, the way they translate it, or they could use it differently in a sentence, and maybe they don't use pick up. You can't say pick up a pen. I would grab hold of the pen. It could be various different reasons why it doesn't make sense. But when you're speaking the same language all your life, you form more and more meanings with words and with sentences. And you communicate better and better. But communication between humans is hard because we all have our own particular conditioning and our own particular meanings to words. And it's okay, it's easier when you say there is a table, there is a light, I'm going to the shops. But when we start talking about more complicated ideas like non-duality or the emotional body or the physical body, or we start talking about existential things, everything becomes a lot harder and is down to interpretation. You don't have a fixed fact. It's not a fixed fact, the sentence, I am going to the shops, but it's easier for everybody to understand what that means, I am going to the shops. Whereas I feel love That's harder for everybody to have the same interpretation of that word because everybody understands love differently. Before I had the big awakening when I was 30, I had such a different association to what love was. Even though I'd had many awakenings, I'd been around the spiritual scene for so many years, I just didn't have the same relationship to the word love as I do now. And obviously our meanings change and grow as we understand it, and as we understand ourselves better as well. And this is why we struggle so much when we're in personal relationships with people, communicating, because what one person says and when they're trying to express itself, it doesn't mean that the other person is going to have the same meaning that you're trying to portray. They're not necessarily going to understand it in the same way. So if you say, I'm angry because somebody ate my food and I felt like it was disrespectful, to them in their house, maybe they always had that happening when they were growing up. People always ate their food and it was really normal and it was actually a compliment. It meant that you had good food. So when they hear you saying that, they'll have a different relationship to what you have to that particular meaning. And I think this is what creates so many wars with humans, and why humans so desperately want to stick with people that are like-minded, because it makes it easier to communicate. Like, it's easier to communicate with somebody that's been brought up in the same circumstances, has had a similar life to you, than somebody that's had a really different life to you. Although that, to me, that's super exciting, communicating with someone that's had a different life. But you can understand when that is the case, when you live with them intimately, you're going to have a lot of misunderstandings about communication. And why? Because to me, the way that I see things, and I'm not saying this is the way you should say things, and I'm not saying the way I see things is truth. I'm also not saying that the way I see things is a lie. It's just the way I see things, that this body-mind sees things. The way I see things is that everything is objective, that there is never a fixed reality, that it's something that's debatable. And not coming to that realization and believing that there are fixed things and that everything is solid and everything is a particular way, this creates, I believe, a lot of confusion. When the mind longs to have knowledge which it can understand, like 1 + 1 = 2, when it craves to have that in everyday life, it gets so confused because it can't possibly have that. You can't possibly understand this world or understand this reality or understand that vulnerable, beautiful, completely unique human being in front of you. Like, thought is a great tool. It's an amazing tool. We have done so many beautiful things with thought. So thought is a great thing. But it's not a truth. You're never going to be able to come to a thought that's fixed and true. So say if you have the thought, you realize that, you know, a big mistake that you've made all your life is always seeking for love in things. So say you realize that, you might believe that that's a truth. That's a truth, and it might feel so profound, and you might try to hold on to that thought. But that thought was just relevant to when it was relevant, and then it's not a truth anymore. Then what's happening is what's happening. It's objective. So you might think, okay, non-duality is that there is no body. And that's like a great way to try to describe it, that there is nobody looking out of these eyes. There's this body-mind, this character which is expressing and talking, which life is talking through. But there's nobody actually experiencing. There's not somebody in time experiencing this life. That somebody in time is being experienced. And so that might be such a relief and so profound for you to realize, or maybe you realize it more and more over time. And then you begin to think that's true. And as you begin to think that's true, you begin to step into another illusion, something else, which you put tightly around you, and you try to hold on to that. And that will begin to make you confused over time, because that's not the truth. And that's not the nature of reality. The nature of reality is that everything changes, including thoughts and belief systems. The only thing that we can say is true and reality is what's happening. That's all we ever have. And even trying to say that isn't truth. It's like, that isn't the way it is. All we ever have is what is. That's the reality. Everything else is debatable. Everything else comes and goes. Everything else is depending what you compare it to, because that's the fabric of language, is comparison. The truth is that this is, and that everything comes and goes in this, and that this what is an absolute mystery for the mind. Itself, the alive presence, in a way, it isn't a mystery for itself. It's so ordinary and knows itself as it is itself, but it can never be described or depicted in the mind. And that for the mind is very confronting, I think. I think this is like a huge obstacle for the mind, because the mind always wants to fix it into thought. Let me grasp this in thought and hold on to it and take it to bed. And most of the time, it wants to do that because it feels afraid. That person feels afraid. It feels afraid to not think about things. It believes that there's a safety in thinking and understanding, which there is on the human level. But you know, for understanding, you know, potential dangers, that is a safety. But then there's always going to be new potential dangers. The mind is never going to make it to an end. The mind will always think of something else and do something else and change. That's the nature of thinking. That's the beauty of thinking, and that's how it's meant to be. The thoughts, the mind, thinking is always meant to evolve and change and develop. It's never meant to be stuck. Like if you think about 100 or 200 years ago, the way humans think to the way humans think now, like if you'd been alive those whole 200 years, you'd have had to get used to the idea of changing your ideas. Like, you know, I don't know if it was 200 years ago they still believed the world was flat, although some people believe that now. But like cars, the internet, communicating through a phone, like all these things, like women voting, women having jobs. Although women might have had jobs in the past, but most women didn't. So many different things, the internet, the sharing of information. The person would have had to been so open to evolve, to let the mind evolve. And it's the same with non-duality. Like the ways we try to point out non-duality is that non-duality cannot be spoken of, but what we're trying to, or what people are trying to show, is that what you already believe isn't a fact. It's like opening up that mind. Like stopping that mind trying to grab hold and keep everything, because while it does that, it makes a condensed, separate self, and that feels like the reality, that feels like the person. And as that mind begins to relax, then something else is seen that was always there, that was always present. Like it's always been this present moment, right? It's never been something else than this. It's so exciting, all the things that are happening now and the changes that are happening in humanity. The internet, thinking, living. I mean, it's just opening up more and more and more and more. What we think is good, what we think is bad. I think it's the hardest thing because to communicate this part, because what the mind is looking for is a new belief system. when I used to hear this subject, I felt this resonance beyond that. Like when they said stuff about the present moment, I knew this, like that childlike wonder. They talked about the present moment or beingness or aliveness. It was like I remembered it. But the mind, the thinking mind, including my mind even then, wanted a belief system to live by. And these belief systems can be actually really beneficial. You can use these belief systems, but just know they're belief systems. So sometimes when you get into this subject, your mind is, you've got into negative belief systems and difficult belief systems. So you can take on new belief systems, like all of this subject. Like this can be really beneficial, but just know also, like have a lightness to it. It's also not reality. Like there's a knowing intellectually that you aren't separate, that you aren't really the doer of your actions, and nothing really is your fault or the other person's fault. That getting isn't gonna get you there. I was watching this psychologist the other day, and he was saying that that psychologically we love the act of moving towards something, but when we actually get it, it doesn't. We prefer the act of moving towards something than actually getting it. Actually, when we get it, it's disappointing, and that's psychologically how we are set up. And it's true. We enjoy the action of doing things, like going out and doing something, having a reason and a motive to do something. But then when it's finished, then we're like, what now? And so it's seeing that life is about the journey. It's not about the destination. It's not about getting there. You're never going to get there, never. It's going to be more the same. You know, if you're stressed and you've got a really busy life, like some people do, especially if you've got kids and household and family and job, it can be super stressful, but you're never going to get to the end of your chores. Your sort of hope is that you're going to get to the end of your chores tomorrow, but you never are. And actually you don't want to get to your end of your chores. You want to do things. You do actually want to participate, but your mind can't cope with all the thoughts about it. It gets stressed having not completed stuff and not knowing what it's going to look like, of not knowing what it's going to do. So it's just seeing that mentality, seeing that addiction to believing that you've got to get it over and finished, where really you don't want to get it over and finished. And the reason that you want to get it over and finished is because you believe you'll arrive. And that arrival feeling that you're looking for is actually the presence, is actually this alive presence that's right here. It's not something that you achieve or get. It's so amazing. There's like always things to do in this life. You clean the house, it gets dirty. You clean the house, it gets dirty. You make the bed, then you sleep in it. You make the bed, you sleep in it. You do your taxes, then there's more taxes. Or you do your admin, then there's more admin gets made. It's like that's the way this life goes. If you look around at everything, it's always like that. It's always evolving and growing. Your freedom is in every action. And no matter how stressful you believe it is. And this life, this Western life, is super stressful for people. I've been lucky, like I'm in my late 30s now, and I've been lucky that I haven't had to be invested so much like all my peers have. And I've had a lot of time to meditate and reflect and go over this subject, and I never got so involved in materialism and trying to get all these things. And getting all these things, then you have to look after all these things. Getting all this money, then you have to look after all this money. Not that I'm against it, but it all requires work. And then if you've got kids and a business and all these things on top of it, it's super stressful. So your hope to get to the end of it, just notice the thought, the hope to get to the end of it. And really, the only freedom you're ever going to have is the happening. That's it. That's where life is. This is the freedom. Mine is like, I want to get enlightened, and enlightenment becomes this new thing to get to. It's the movement towards that. It's listening to my talk now. It's understanding these concepts. It's your bum on the seat. It's the sound of the cars outside. The clicking of the clock. Whatever it is that's happening. Oops, pardon me. I do apologize for burping. It's very, very rude of me in English society. In Indian society, I know it's not so rude. One time I went for a nadi leaf reading. This was in my 20s. It was so funny. And the guy that was reading the nadi leaf, it took so long. Nadi leaves are like these big leaves that have been put away for 5,000 years and they've got your future on it. And we were in the, and it took so long. It took like 8 hours for them to find the nadi leaf. And finally they find my nadi leaf and I go in, and then there's the Indian guy and then there's a translator. So the Indian guy that reads the nadi leaf and then the guy that translates. And it was just after lunch, I think, or dinner, or some meal. And anyway, the guy that was reading my nadi leaf in Tamil, I think it was. No, actually it wasn't Tamil. Forgot what language it was, but in India. And he was reading it. And as he was reading it, he did it in a song. So they sing it to you. And then the other guy's translating. He's like, it was so funny. And this is so different from English culture. Like in India, I think it's not in all Indian culture. I can't say that. I'm sure I'm going to be shot for being racist or prejudiced now. But in certain Indian cultures and in communities, I get the sense that that's considered polite, that you've enjoyed it, or you like it's not a rude thing. But to me, like it was like I'm having this spiritual moment where he's reading out my life and my destiny and what's going to happen in my life, and then he keeps burping, and I'm wanting to be serious and profound, and then I kept getting the giggles. It was super funny. But in English society, it's really rude. So all the English audience will be like, who does she think she is? They'll think I'm insulting them. It's just a bit gas, though, if you look at it from a different angle. But Indian society, in some Indian societies or in some societies in the world, is maybe not considered that. So what is the truth? Is it rude or is it not? Rude or not? Which one's the truth? Which one's reality? Do I go to jail for it, or do I get commended for it? This is the same with everything. Everything is debatable. Okay, so I take some questions now, just because I have no idea how that's being heard.